Hey, welcome to this Friday's live stream. And hey, it's been a busy week, a busy day. I've already been shooting videos and everything today. So welcome to this live stream. I am John Townsend here in front of the camera. And on the other side here are the Three Stooges back there. We've got, there's Aaron on the console that makes the stream happen. There's Kyle in the hot seat asking the questions, and there's Ryan up here making me do whatever I'm supposed to be doing in this live stream, helping me remember all the things I'm supposed to remember.
Somebody called us the video nerds in a comment.
The
video nerds.
So,
Can you ban them, please?
So thank you everyone out there, and I want to thank these guys for the great job they're doing. Today we got lots of stuff to cover. The topic is importing, exporting, and maybe a little smuggling here at the end. And what do I need to talk about, Ryan?
Well, we got to do some housekeeping.
Yeah, let's do the real quick housekeeping up front. If you want to help support what we do on the channel, and that is so much help for what we do, Super Chat is up and running, so you can do Super Chat on YouTube here. A lot of folks help us over on Patreon. We have something like 422, something like 422 people that help us on Patreon, and that's a wonderful way. If people want to support us on Patreon, they actually pledge a small amount each month, and it kind of gets debited. It's like $1, $2, $5, whatever, something like that. So you get to choose the level that you want to support, and you can stop at any time, and so many people help us that way. It's a wonderful way to support us. There's a link down in the description section for that. We also have items. I mean, what we do here at James Townsend & Son is sell 18th and 19th century reproductions, hats and clothes and shoes and camping things, stuff like that, all that has to do with 18th century reenacting. We also have some merchandise, mugs and t-shirts. We're kind of low on that kind of stuff right now. We got some coming up, so stay tuned for the next couple weeks, and hopefully we'll be rolling out some more cool merch. And is there anything else that I missed? Anything?
Well, as far as that goes, there is the link in the description today.
Oh yes, we have a special going on just for you guys on live stream. We haven't told anybody else about it. Can they even find it on the website if they don't have the link? I don't know if that's up. They can, but it's a special that's only going on for the next like 2 hours until 6 o'clock today. We have the new DVD out, so series 11, which has all the cooking that we did, whatever that series was. It's about 25 episodes. We bundle all these guys up together on a DVD, and we have our whole catalog of DVDs, 11 cooking DVDs now. We bundled those all together, and you'll get a Jim's Red Pants Whitby Abbey CD, the brand new CD they did. We bundled that all together at a special price of, I think, $60, and the regular price would be something like, I don't know,
at least 80.
Yeah, at least 80. So whatever it is, but that's a special deal. There's a link in the description section for that. There we go.
We got a brand new catalog.
We have a brand new catalog is out. There it is. We just got in a giant shipment of these things. It took us like an hour just to haul them in the back door. There's a lot of catalogs. If you're interested in a catalog, you can, there's a link again in the description section, maybe, or there you go. There's a link. You can go and you can request one. We actually send them out bulk rate, so you can get one free if you're interested.
All right, and we've got an Instagram contest winner.
Instagram contest. Are we ready for that?
Sure.
Yeah, so every week we pick out somebody on Instagram that has hashtag Townsend's, and we pick them out as a winner, and we send them a gift certificate, and the winner is this week.
Right here, it's alive. It's Sam. And it's Sam's birthday 2 days
Sam's
ago.
birthday,
Happy
yes,
birthday.
I said happy birthday, Sam. And so there's the picture, and Ryan will get a hold of him on that.
Already done. He's already got his gift card.
He's already got the gift card. Well, that was quick. If you want to participate, we look for pictures each and every week that are... he's holding up his arm. each and every week. Hashtag Townsend's. You can also at Townsend's _official to help us find those in the feed. But it's so much fun digging through those. They can be history pictures or merch pictures or you at a historic site or in a historical, whatever that's kind of related to what we do here on the channel. If you cook a recipe, we would love to see that in the live stream or in Instagram. So make sure to hashtag Townsend's.
All right, let's talk about the Great Appalachian Homesteading Conference.
Yeah, let's cover this real quick. Great Appalachian Homesteading Conference is coming up May 4th and 5th. I will be there doing a presentation about the connection between the 18th century and modern homesteading. Let's see. I've got somewhere in here a giant pile. Oh, here we go. Here's the kind of stuff that's going on at the Homesteading Conference. There's me, whatever. Chickens for children. There's a piece about homestead health and preparedness. There's beekeeping stuff going on. Livestock guardian dogs. Top 5 herbs for homestead. Ham radio stuff. Essential oils. Soaps. Stuff about horses, dairy animals, sourdough. They've got lots and lots of stuff going on at the Homesteading Conference. This one is in Cookeville, Tennessee, I believe. So there's a link, again, down in the description section. If you're in that sort of Tennessee area or anywhere in that area, you're interested in homesteading, there you go. Check that out. I'll be there. It'll be a lot of fun.
All right, John, talk to us about importing in the 18th century.
So one of the questions that comes up a lot in these live streams and in the comment section, people are it's hard for us to get our brains around what it was like in colonial America, in whether things were available, what kinds of things were available. You know, so a lot of times in a recipe, I'll use lemons. That's a great example. Lemons are really common in the cookbooks, but were lemons available? Were they expensive? You know, a lot of people kind of fight over those concepts about whether they were even available in North America at the time. But it turns out that lots of stuff was imported into North America all through the 18th century, especially things like lemons or other items, but just about everything you needed for living was available someplace at some price in North America. So it wasn't like we were all here in North America living with, bear skins and having to eat, nothing but raw roots or something like that. So one of the great places you'll find information about this is old newspaper advertisements. And newspaper advertisements are wonderful to figure out what life was like for regular people because they're advertising all kinds of great things. Here's several advertisements from newspapers. These are Boston newspapers mostly. London pewterer, just imported from London. Pewter plates, basins, breakfast bowls, spoons, teapots, soup kettles. I wonder what a pewter soup kettle was like. Chamber pots. Everyone needs a chamber pot. Here's earthenware that's just being imported from Liverpool. Pipes, woolens. He has all kinds of plates and bowls, so everything for your table. Other things that were being imported are like china plates, something that we would think would be very expensive or very hard to come by. That all these kinds of very high-end porcelain goods were being imported into North America. Excuse me. Plates of blue and white cups and saucers, all more of that kind of tableware. Let's see, they were importing all kinds of clothing too. So this one I thought was really interesting because it's all super high-end stuff. Let's see, velvet caps, lace for gentlemen's ruffles shirts, white kid gloves, women's underdress stays, hat buckles, okay? Ladies' gilt and bordered message cards. So we want to have little, I'm visiting you message cards that are gilt. Yes, they import those for you. How about an ivory and ebony nutmeg grater? really high-end nutmeg grater. You got to have the best, right? A great variety of toothpick cases. So, and pomatum. You want stuff to slick your hair back? You got to have it. Knives and forks, all being imported. Fancy knives and forks, and let's see, leather ink pots. I don't know what a leather ink pot's like. How about food? Italian chocolate, imported into Great Britain. All kinds of sugars, muscovado sugar, loaf sugar, coffee, chocolate, teas, sago, barley, citron, ginger, pepper, nutmegs, cinnamon, cloves, mace, indigo, tons of stuff, all being imported. It just goes on and on. There's somebody Young and Best's Durham mustard. Again, here you go, fresh Lisbon lemons. Basically, anything you want, it's gonna be imported, and depends on how much money you got to pay, but you can get it. There you go. All the kinds of stuff you're gonna find imported into North America.
All right, well, let's move on to some questions. But first, what's in that bottle right there?
Oh yeah. I got some 6-month-old ginger beer. Remember the other day, a couple months ago, I had some ginger beer. Couldn't get it open because it was so powerful. But this batch is ready to go. They've even got some back there if they want to crack it open. I've got a couple bottles. This is from right after I did the ginger beer episode. And I got a sore throat, so I needed something to drink for this episode anyway. So there we go. A little bit of ginger beer. Nice and gingery. Not too sweet. Great taste. Definitely got a beery flavor to it because you can even see there's a little bit of that yeast kind of falling to the bottom in this bottle, but excellent. Turns out good. 6 months later, it's still really good.
Ooh, so cold. Nice and cold.
Nice and chilly.
Yep, there you
Do
go.
you have any questions for us yet, sir?
Yeah.
I've got a couple. All right, so what would they have smuggled at that time?
Are we going to get to smuggling already?
Well, I mean, the questions probably dictate that, but we were going to talk that a little later. But
Yeah, we'll jump right into what?
Well, I can ask other ones.
Yeah, let's hold smuggling till a little to another 10 or 15 minutes.
All right.
I've got some smuggling for you.
Gotcha. How important was hemp to import and export? What kinds of goods may be imported, exported, or smuggled? I'm sorry. We're not talking about smuggling.
Keep this smuggling on the down low. You know, they were importing a lot of the finished goods. So all of this idea of importing, exporting, especially as a colony is concerned, the system under which we were kind of living under, definitely with Great Britain, was a mercantile system, which was that their idea of colonies were colonies would supply raw goods to Great Britain. We would export all these raw goods to them, and then they would, manufacture them into cool things, and we would get them back. And that's really what's happening so much through the 18th century. In fact, if you look at the magazine advertisements, you can or newspaper advertisements, you kind of see the shift going from imported things to those items being made as you go through the 18th century, and you say, aha, we're starting to make our own things as time goes on. So normally the things like hemp, we might export the raw fibers and then import the fabrics or the rope or whatever it is. Although we were certainly manufacturing some kinds of rope and fabrics during the time. Although a lot of the fabrics, like linen clothing, or cloth itself, and the clothing, we were importing.
How important? Sorry, I just read that one. How hard was it to import things to the colonies during the American Revolution?
Well, there was certainly they were trying to really stop the navigation and importation of things. Trying during the war, restricting that. Obviously, Great Britain had control of the seas to the greatest extent, so that definitely put a hamper on the importation of certain kinds of things. So yeah, it would have been difficult, and we were trying to import war materials or whatever, like coats, but it went both ways. Sometimes things were captured. So one of the kinds of regimental coats that ends up being used by colonial soldiers are red coats that were captured and then over-dyed to turn them into brown coats because they couldn't change them into a different color. So if you get red and you want to use it, what do you do with it, right? So it kind of happened both ways, whether we would capture their things or they captured our things.
So how did the British interfere with trade? Like, what did they do?
They would have ships standing on and off the coast, keeping you from bringing your ships in, and then loading your goods, and they would capture them and sell those goods off. So that was standard letter of the mark kind of things, or standard military things where they would capture merchant vessels that were enemy merchant vessels and then sell the goods.
Did people export lumber to England?
Oh, wow. So later on in the exports section, I will read the table of the kinds of things that we are exporting in the late 18th century. But lumber is way up there. And de Warvel, in his book, this one's all about the travels. I've talked about traveling in North America, de Warvel's book. But the second half of this book is about commerce in America, and he talks about all these kinds of things and he spends a good deal of time talking about lumber and how there isn't very much lumber in Europe because they've cut all their trees down already, and we just have lumber running out our ears. So, and that's painful.
Were items ever brought up from the Spanish and French colonies in Lower Alabama and North Florida?
Yes, there's certainly a great deal of trade going on both directions with Spain and with her colonies.
That's all I got for right now.
There we go.
All right, well, let's talk about exporting.
Let's talk about exporting because we've been getting to that.
Let's get some more questions in here, folks.
Yeah.
Well, let me do this donation real
Okay,
quick.
go.
I've been meaning to do it, and I forgot to. It's from our good friend Max are Cool. He donates like every week.
We're good.
It's so awesome. Thank you.
Thank you so
Max
much.
are cool.
Yeah. $10. What was the hardest foodstuff to get imported or smuggled that we take for granted today?
Wow. That's a real interesting one, and I don't have a great answer for that off the top of my head. When we get to smuggling a little bit, I'll talk about the kind of main thing that's smuggled there, but I don't have a super good answer. I'll think about that as we go on. Let's see. Exporting. So obviously I talked about that mercantile system, and the United States America was exporting sort of these raw goods. And one of these things is rice, right? You wouldn't think rice would be way up there on our list of goods exported, but it says during 1768, 1769, 1770, we're exporting 115,000 barrels of rice a year. So rice is way up there on the kinds of things that we're exporting. So here's a list that was compiled in 1792, and it kind of goes through these items that are from most popular to least popular that we are exporting, and this is by dollar amount, not necessarily by volume. So our biggest export was bread stuff. So wheat and wheat flour and maybe some other kinds of flours, but that's the top thing. And the next one down is tobacco. Tobacco is one of the major exports. Most of them coming right from that Virginia and Maryland area, and that was such a huge portion of what's being exported. Although there are good things and bad things about how that worked for even the planters in Virginia, because they were always in debt. There's a section where de Warvel talks about that. After tobacco, number 3 is rice. So rice is the third biggest export. The one right after rice, number 4, is wood. You were talking about lumber going out. So 4, wood is way up there on the list. The next one's down, salted fish. You wouldn't think salted fish would be a big export. Pearl ash and potash, which, again, you may not even know what pearl ash and potash is, but that pearl ash and potash come from what happens when you burn down your forests and you don't have anything else to do with it. You can make pearl ash and potash, and those get used in different kinds of chemical processes, making soaps, even chemical leavening. So indigo is there, salted meat, horses and mules, whale oil is a big export. Flax seed, not necessarily the flax itself, but the seed. Tar, pitch, turpentine, live provisions, so we're exporting live animals, and then we're re-exporting foreign goods that get imported into the United States. So those are the next things. But notice, all those things are basically raw materials, not things that we are manufacturing right there in the 18th century. Let's see, what else did I have? Okay, so if we're exporting all these things, where are we exporting them to? The biggest market for us was Great Britain, and then it looks like France, then Spain, then Portugal, and the Netherlands. So those are the big places that we are exporting to, and we're importing basically from the same places. Huge amounts from Great Britain, a lot from France, the Netherlands, not as much from Spain or Portugal. So there you go. You get some real interesting information as we dig through those numbers and kind of get an idea about where all this importation and exportation is coming from. What do you think back there in question land?
Okay, so was there a lot of impressment going on before the War of 1812? Any of that going on in the 18th century as well?
I don't think you certainly don't hear them complaining about that as much, and I think it has to do with whether or not there's a great demand on maritime labor or naval labor going on within Great Britain, and I think the impressment really happens for kind of a couple different fold reasons, but as there's a pressing need because of conflicts with France, then obviously they need more sailors, and so there's a kind of press for that. And before that, in the 18th century, you don't have those same kinds of issues going on as much, so there wasn't as much need for sailors, so they weren't pressing for it.
Hey, $20 from Ed Chimera. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, Ed.
Yeah. I'm just going to start saying first names.
There
This
you
last
go.
name thing is
That's
brutal.
Chimera, Aaron.
Chimera?
Chimera.
Yeah, come here.
Hey, thanks for the
Thanks,
$20.
Ed.
Yeah. Were most of the ships armed?
I would probably say armed at least into a small extent. When you read the naval interactions, you'll definitely certainly see some conditions where they're basically, a merchant might be completely unarmed. So basically, any small military vessel comes up and it's like, okay, we give up. We've got nothing to defend ourselves with. We're just kind of hopefully, trying to run under the radar so that we don't have to do any fighting. And if we do, we just plain give up. So you'd certainly see that to a certain extent, usually with very small things, fishing boats, obviously, and certain kinds of small merchant vessels. But I think generally they at least tried to arm themselves a small amount against very, kind of local pirate kind of problems where people would, come right out from the coast and try to take over your ship. So most of them are going to be armed at least to a small extent.
Here's $10 from David.
Thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you.
David.
The colonies were so resource rich.
Yes.
When did we start to take our raw materials and make our own things?
Well, you see even through those newspaper advertisements that slow build of us building up manufacturing and making those goods. So you see that build all through the 18th century, and really, it takes off in the 19th century when we really start to become a bit more of a agricultural or a manufacturing powerhouse. That certainly happens in when right there in that 19th century time period. But it's building all through the 18th century.
Here's $5 from Stephen Hunt.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Stephen.
Yeah. My wife, Linda, and I are watching and enjoying your channel. Hope everything is well for you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I got for donations right now.
Okay.
Okay, what kind of animals were imported during the 18th century?
What was I reading about recently? Yeah, I was, I don't have anything off the top of my head except for a piece out of Peter Kalm I was reading yesterday or the day before. And he was talking to a very old Swedish man who was at the location. He was trying to get an idea about what it was like in the 17th century for these guys that were settling. Especially, there's this contingent of sort of like a Swedish colony that happens in New York, New Jersey area, and he's asking the guy about where the animals came from, and he actually says that the Swedish immigrants brought their animals over with them, and when the Dutch came over later on, and when the English came over, they bought animals from the Swedish guys that were already there, so they really weren't importing as many of their own animals in. It was easier to come here and it's like, oh, there's already animals to buy. So we don't have to import our own animals. But there's certainly a portion of those breeding stock that's going to be coming over, and even talks about how much more quickly they can grow their breeding stock here in North America because of the great quantity of fodder that's available and how quickly they grow. So although there's certain talk about how the animals are weaker and smaller in North America. But,
$10 from S. Barger.
thank you, S. Bart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
John, would colonists export native goods? Were the indigenous goods highly valued antiques or knickknacks?
Well, they were certainly collected, and you'll find some folks like Thomas Jefferson, a big collector of Native American artifacts. Even Nicholas Creswell, that we talk about so much, he collects and takes home some Native American items. I don't know about the exportation of them as a thing, though. That I haven't seen so much as a commercial entity, but certainly personally, those items were of great interest to scientific men.
What type of invasive plants and or animals were brought in from different countries during that time?
Wow, what was I? That reminds me of something, and boy, it's hard for me to put that one together. We certainly, there are many plants that something like the plantain plant, that not the banana, but the little kind of crabgrass that grows in our lawns, is said to be a plant that was brought in by the Europeans, and it spreads so quickly that it in fact seems to spread ahead of people. But I'm not sure, nothing else comes to mind. I know there was a particular reference, but I can't remember it at the moment that had to do with that very thing.
Hey, John, can you
Yes.
talk to us about the American frontier?
So we are working on right now a new series on the YouTube channel. Some of our videos aren't directly connected with it, but most of them right now we're working on that are directly connected with this concept of what it's like on the American frontier. In general, the channel has to do with all things sort of 18th century, but right now we're focusing specifically on what it's like in the American frontier. So currently we're running through a short series within a series with Dan Wowak about frontier life, and specifically woodcraft, bushcraft, and what it's like living in the wilderness and the skills that you need. We're also working on some that are having to do with the skills and craftsmen of that time period and what you would need on the frontier. Even within that, we're looking at journals and doing some videos that are specifically about telling us about what life is like on this kind of frontier. And the frontier really changes all through time, doesn't it? There's an American frontier in the 17th century and in the 18th century, and it continues to be a frontier in the 19th century. It just keeps moving from the coast and further in. So there's so much to cover here and so many interesting things. We've got definitely some great projects planned into the summer and maybe into the fall for this frontier series. So we're having a lot of fun, and there's so much to cover.
And did you have some Patreon names that you wanted to cover?
Yeah, I've got some Patreon names. I got so many pieces of paper here that it's hard to find all the... Well, here we go. Got them. So I mentioned Patreon as one of the ways people help support us. And S. Barger, that just donated a little bit ago.
Right.
He's on here. He's a Patreon supporter.
Awesome.
So double thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Malcolm Baylor, Arthur Roberts, and so many others help us out in that way. Thank you guys out there on Patreon.
Yeah, we appreciate it.
Thank you. Hey, let's talk about smuggling.
So, Great Britain, obviously, they had this vested interest in wanting to trade with the colonies and basically making that all about, that connection between the colonies and Great Britain. And they really didn't want us importing from other countries. So anything that was imported from other countries was really intended first to go to Great Britain and then come to us directly. So they would be able to be kind of the intermediary, and many times those things were kind of double taxed, right? So they would get a duty going into Great Britain, and then we would have to pay for it again. So it might make things much more expensive depending on what they were getting. Those laws about how that worked generally started about I think the first one was 1651, where they really wanted to restrict that trade. And every time they would make one of these laws, everyone would kind of get upset, and they would, sometimes they would back off the law a little bit, or they would adjust it. And many times it was sort of, we'll look, instead of adjusting the law, we'll try to kind of turn a blind eye to people breaking the rules about this, because it was very hard to enforce. There's a very, in the colonies, there's a very long, coastline, and it's pretty easy to smuggle things in. If you want to sneak things in, there's multiple different kind of ways you could do that. And so it happened, and the authorities would, it's like, oh, well, we try to catch the big guys, right? As that pressure keeps being applied, though, the merchants in Great Britain, they want those laws enforced. And so they would keep adjusting these laws and making them kind of harder, right? And there's a specific laws that come in about 1733, and they try to restrict the molasses trade. And so what's happening is we're importing molasses from non-British colonies in the Caribbean. We're importing that sugar, that molasses, and then we're turning it into rum. And so all this stuff gets brought up into Boston, and they make a bunch of rum with all that molasses. Great Britain, they don't want that to happen. So there's always this thing that's going, it's like we changed the law and people are trying to get around it. The Stamp Act is another one of those things that's going on there in the 1760s, the same kind of deal where they're really trying to apply these taxes. They're trying to, buckle down. And there are some very important, big, famous people in the 18th century that were kind of famous for their smuggling and trying to get around those things. And some people even think that the revolution was really fought more about, hey, you guys are kind of, you're putting a damper on our smuggling, and that's where we're making our money. And so that's what's causing the certainly a portion of the reason why the Revolutionary War happened. So, yeah, molasses is one of those big things that gets smuggled in. You wouldn't think molasses would be a big, illegal trade, but it was.
What about coffee smuggling, John?
I think there's definitely a certain amount of some of that smuggling is definitely coming in from the Dutch. So we would be trading with the Dutch directly, and the Dutch had a giant portion of the spice trade. coffee trade, those things going on. So that's a lot of the smuggling's going on with the Dutch connection.
What were the punishments for smuggling?
I think I was reading that during part of that time, the Great Britain changed the rules about smuggling and started classifying smugglers as pirates. And pirates, you just put to death. So it could be a pretty severe punishment depending on the time and the situation.
That leads me into my next question. How big was the threat of pirates?
Well, I think it really depends on how you define it. Obviously, Great Britain right there was trying to define piracy in a certain kind of way. Most of the pirate things that we think of, the golden age of piracy is really the 17th century. There's still piracy going on in the early 18th century and even later on, but I think, is it Blackbeard? He's like finally... he's like one of that last tier of important pirates, and that's in the 1720s. So it's still going on. I think sometimes when we think about pirates, we think about or some things that are still kind of called pirates or privateers that are going on. That's certainly going on in the Revolutionary War, where people are sort of private war. We're going to go out and take over ships and make a good bit of money and kind of half do it for military reasons, but mostly for making money.
Yeah, I know that Blackbeard was a privateer, a big privateer at a time.
Yeah. And then after a while,
he just did it because he didn't want to get hung.
Yeah.
Were there women smugglers?
Undoubtedly, but I don't have any specific information on that.
Were southern Spanish colonies ever taken advantage of to smuggle items?
Well, there was undoubtedly to a certain extent. Part of the things that they would do would say they would import an item and they would say it was from one place, but it was really from another. So it makes it a little bit easier when you have these places right off to the edge. You can kind of import items. So yes.
How would people know when the smugglers were in town? Like, how did they get connected to the black market?
Yeah, I don't know. I think most of the time they wouldn't actually know those things were that way. The item would come in and the importation tax wouldn't get paid, but most people didn't know that the item was smuggled. I think most of the time those things just ended up in the stores like everything else, and you had no idea that it was an illicit good or one that was illegal.
We'll do another donation.
Great.
This is from Ed again.
Okay.
$50.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Ed.
Did they smuggle muskets, cannons, mortars, etc. into colonies? If so, were those weapons from France and Spain?
There wasn't necessarily, I don't know if you would call it smuggling, but there were certainly military goods that were brought into North America, specifically during the Revolutionary War. A lot of French uniforms and military goods were imported specifically for the war, and they managed to get those through and to the soldiers, to the government. And there was also Spanish things during the Revolutionary War. That's one of those connections. Specifically the Spain connection is one that doesn't get talked about an awful lot, but there's a great connection there with the military goods that are coming to the rebels.
What sort of extremes did people go to in order to smuggle something?
Well, I think anytime you're putting your life on the line, that's an extreme. I'm not sure how I would answer that in a different way.
Let's see here. How common was trade with Canada, particularly with expelled loyalists?
I haven't run into much of that. I would think that Canada would really be much in the same way we were in that 18th century time frame, that there wasn't a lot of there isn't a lot that we would necessarily need from Canada that we wouldn't already have, and vice versa. So most of the trade was happening not between those countries, but with Canada to Great Britain and United States to Great Britain or France or whatever. So I don't think there's much happening all that much between the two colonies, so to speak.
Okay, let's go through some housekeeping again. We got to wrap this up pretty soon.
Yeah. Housekeeping. Gosh, guys. I want to thank the folks that have supported us with Super Chat today. So that's one of the ways people help support us. A lot of folks support us through Patreon. I want to thank the Patreon supporters. We do have that special today, right? So I spoke about that earlier. We have cooking DVD number 11 that's available now, where we package up our cooking DVDs or cooking videos up on DVD. And that's a great way for people. A lot of people like to enjoy the cooking videos without having to go to YouTube, or they know people who don't have access to YouTube, but they do have a DVD player. So we have these available, all packaged up, and you can watch them all in one string or whatever you need to do. So we have this special bundle deal, all our DVDs put together, and the most recent Jim's Red Pants CD. Jim's Red Pants are the guys that do the music that's underneath all our cooking videos. So this is our latest CD. We bundled these all together, all 11 of the DVDs plus the CD, whew, too many Ds, all put together for a special price. So that's available. There's a link down in the description section. If you're interested in homesteading, if you're in the Tennessee area, I will be at the Great Appalachian Homesteading Conference, May 4th and 5th in Cooksville, Tennessee. That's bound to be a great event. They have lots of programs going on if you're interested in homesteading in that area. What else is there? I'm forgetting something, Ryan. He's not ready for this.
No, I am. I just don't see anything that you're forgetting.
Ah, boy. So there you go. And there's the new catalog. The new Townsend's catalog is out. See, I'm remembering the stuff. He can't remember.
Hold it up.
New Townsend's catalog is out. Here it is. It's even got Ryan on the cover. That's kind of scary. That is available. You can get one free bulk rate if you go over to the link, and you can sign up for a catalog. We would love to send you one. So, yeah, I want to thank everyone out there for your amazing comments and your great support on this one, especially when you share our videos, you share the live streams. We get so much great interaction that way and so much great support. So I want to thank everyone out there for all that you do, and thanks for watching.